how much I hate wearing masks.
I'll get you an email and I'll send you.
Good evening. Good evening back there, Councilor Haas. The hour of 5:30 having arrived, I call to order this special meeting of the Municipal Services, Facilities, and Infrastructure Committee. Meetings being broadcast live on the City of Keene YouTube channel and channel 1302. Video is also streamed on the city's website and is posted on the website by the end of the next business day, barring any technical difficulties. Copies of the printed agenda are available in the wall pockets just as you enter the room. Public and other city councilors will be recognized to ask questions and make comments on the agenda item under discussion. Once being recognized, all remarks are to be made through the chair. I will not recognize an individual a second time until everyone has had a chance to speak. Anyone who wishes to address the committee is asked to go to one of the microphones in the room, identify yourself by name and address prior to speaking. Our minute taker is participating remotely this evening. Committee members, remember to turn on your microphone and remind me to do mine. If the minute taker is unable to hear, they're going to ask you to speak louder or turn your mic on. So we have a quorum present. I call to order this special meeting. And let's see, that's it. Okay, first item on the agenda this evening. Actually, this meeting is like a two-part. We have our regular agenda as well as a discussion regarding the downtown infrastructure project. So first item on the agenda is a request for a license to use city right-of-way Hurricane Road. Our city engineering staff is going to address this, or?
No, I'm here from the nonprofit that is asking for the request.
One moment. City.
Maybe we should start with the petitioner.
Fine, okay. Not the usual, but that's all right. Come on up.
It's okay, we're not the usual either.
Okay, name and address, and if you're more comfortable sitting, whatever you like.
Oh, that's fine. My name is Lauren Hubele. My address is 180 Hurricane Road.
Thank you.
And I'm representing the Gym of Forest, which is a New Hampshire nonprofit. Keep
And
going?
if you
Okay.
go on with your request.
Currently, we are leasing 12.5 acres of land from the filtering company under the management of Peter Hansel. We came here to New Hampshire, myself and my family, in order to start this nonprofit. We are growing native trees and shrubs and plants for medicinal purposes. And after 1 year of growing on the land, it became clear that we needed irrigation in order to make this a sustainable project. We applied to NRCS for funding for that irrigation and support. And in order for NRCS to proceed with funding for us, they need a member of the city official to sign off on a form saying that the conduit that has been in place now for over 50 years can be reused.
Okay, sounds pretty simple.
Seems that way.
Committee questions?
No, that's
I know.
fine.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So city staff, apparently city attorney will,
Yeah, thank you, and I'll pinch hit for the city engineer this evening. I've been working with the Public Works Department and the city engineer on this. I mean, essentially, the city doesn't have any particular concern with respect to the infrastructure itself. We have reached out to the applicant to request some specific authority with respect to the property owners on either side of the road, the filtering owners, to just establish that there is an agreement between the two of them to allow the property to be used for these purposes. So we're anticipating that coming back, and then it will be subject to the same licensing requirements. As usual, the city does not own the fee under Hurricane Road. This is one of the reasons why I want to see the authority. You know, if the city actually owned the fee under the road, I might feel a little bit differently about it. But given that that's the case, I'd like to see that the specific authority for the use.
okay. Are you saying that you want to do your investigation and bring it back to us?
You can act on it tonight,
That's-
because if we don't get it, then the city managers won't execute.
Okay, I guess that makes sense. Okay. Anyone from the public wish to speak to this? Committee? Good. Okay.
I move to recommend that the city manager be authorized to do all things necessary to negotiate and execute a revocable license to install, maintain, and operate an irrigation water supply system across Hurricane Road in the vicinity of 140 and 149 Hurricane Road.
Second.
Motion's been made, second by Council Filio. Once again, anything from the public? Committee? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you for coming. You don't have to leave. It gets
Really exciting.
it gets more interesting as it goes on. Okay, item 2, this is relating to water and sewer abatements covered by ordinance 0-2024-04. City manager?
Sure.
Like to address?
So this is a follow-up to a conversation we had actually at the Rules of Order workshop, where we talked about a sewer abatement request that had come back before you multiple times and was looking to still come back multiple times. At that meeting, it was suggested this really should be an administrative process, that instead it would be determined by the Public Works Director. And if you recall, the last sewer abatement request that we had, the Public Works Director, Court Blomquist at the time, went through the very extensive process that we use to evaluate whether or not an abatement is warranted, including testing the meter, replacing the meter, really to determine if the meter is accurate, and if the water has gone through, then the money is owed. And so this is a follow-up. This makes that change, and designates the Public Works Director as the person to hear and decide the abatement requests.
Thank you.
Yep.
Committee questions? Give you a little bit of history. When I first came on city council, I was a member of the Health, Safety, and Human Services Committee, which has later been rolled into this MSFI, and the Public Works Committee. At the time, the council committee had full authority to grant the abatements. So anytime somebody didn't understand their water bill, or they left their hose running on the lawn or a toilet running, they would come in and try to explain why they shouldn't be billed. And as the manager said, if the water goes through the meter, you own it. It doesn't really matter why or what. And it's a very, very difficult thing to speak to a friend, a neighbor, a taxpayer, constituent, and say what they don't want to hear. But it is just a mechanical what it is. And at the time, in the beginning, the committee itself had the authority to grant this abatement. It didn't even get referred to council. How you like that one, attorney? That was a long time ago.
He's like, that was before me.
So I think that this really puts it where it should be with the Public Works Department. So I'm fully supportive of this. So, any questions from anyone? Public? Counselor?
We move recommendation of adoption of ordinance 0-2024-04.
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Workman. Anything from the public or committee? Seeing none, all in favor? It would be unanimous. Thank you. Wow. We're now on to the main event. A discussion of the downtown infrastructure project. So representing our consultant and our city staff, gentlemen, just to bring you up to date, we've had presentations, and we're basically discussing the Gilboa Avenue and Railroad Street presentation. Also some cleanup work, let's say, on the first discussions on the lower end of Main Street. We on the committee have a series of questions, discussion items that I requested of the staff so that we can give some real advice and make some decisions in moving along. we are working towards a early July done project, meaning council work would be finished, handing it over to the city staff and consultant to actually do the drawings and get some shovels moving. But we're going to hear about the schedule also. So, gentlemen.
Thank you. My name is Brett Rusnock. I'm the infrastructure project manager at Keene Public Works Department. And we have representatives from our consultant, Stantec, with us tonight, our project manager and lead landscape architect for the team. As you mentioned, Chair Greenwald, tonight we are focusing the discussion only on Gilboa Avenue, Railroad Square, and a few minor follow-up discussion items from last month's meeting. And as you mentioned, we have the informal vote topics or informal discussion topics that are going to be presented tonight, and those will be outlined in the presentation, but we wanted to give you kind of a bit of a way to see them all consolidated into one area. So to clarify, we're not looking for a formal vote, but more preferences on these so that we can continue the design process and keep it moving forward. So with that, I'd like to hand it off to Dave McNamara and Bob Corning with Stantec, and I'm going to be available for questions in the front row as needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Brett. My name's Dave McNamara with Stantec. I'm going to start off. We'll go through. We're mostly going to focus on Railroad and Gilboa, going back to the April 10th public workshop. And then to start, we'll get into, as Brett mentioned, just some cleanup stuff on the overall Main Street from last month's meetings. So there's really three pieces or three sections that I think we want to talk about on Main Street: the left turn pocket onto Emerald, some work near the works for a commercial spot, the Lamson Ave, some changes, I guess, at Lamson Ave, which I think are new. They may not have come up at the last MSFI. And the other thing we've done here is we put an updated parking total on the top of this table. So I think in most of the meetings, what we've talked about is the 167 spots that exist on Main Street and Central Square, and then the recommended or the preferred alternative as it's going forward, which right now is at 170 spaces within those two corridors. So with the Gilboa and Railroad discussion, we wanted to add the parking totals from those two streets as well, which you see here at the bottom. So there's another 72 on-street parking spaces between Gilboa and Railroad existing, and that's not counting the parking lots, adjacent to those two streets. And then as you can see over on the right, we're showing 63 spaces going back, but we will talk a little bit more further on in this slide about Gilboa Ave and some changes that could be made there to increase those parking totals under the proposed. So just starting at Emerald Street, back in the March meetings, we had closed off this left turn pocket onto Emerald Street. It's a pretty light turning movement, but there was a lot of feedback from the public and from this committee about the importance of that and being able to get the cars that are looking to make that move out of traffic and allowing that Main Street northbound traffic to continue. So we've added that back in. It's the same size as what's out there today. And as part of that, we moved the crosswalk from the south side of the intersection back to the north side of the intersection. So essentially, this intersection is functionally back to where it is today. It's got the two northbound lanes with the left turn pocket, the crosswalk on the northern side, and then the two southbound lanes coming through. So the next piece of discussion that had come up is getting some of this sidewalk seating in front of the Works Cafe. So we're able to take the bike lane that was shown here. You can see it coming south to north across Eagle and up Main Street. We were able to push it out into that bump out area a little bit and create some more space in front of the Works Cafe. This is a raised tabled intersection, so the intersection itself, the crosswalk will be at grade with the sidewalk. So whereas today, that crosswalk comes in and you've got the tip down in the vicinity of the Works, everything's going to be at the same grade. So there's actually going to be a little bit more room to use, I guess, in front of that building. And then we're able to push the bike lane out a little bit and add some more space in there. So the tables that are out front will be able to go back as they are. So the third piece is Lamson Street, and this has kind of come up as the project's gone on, and city staff looked into, Lamson Street, why it's there, the need to keep that public access, the vehicular access from Main Street. We worked with police and fire as well, and it was determined that vehicular access from Lamson to Main Street isn't necessary. So we've actually closed that off, and we're able to pick up a couple more parking spaces in front of Lamson as part of that. So Lamson will still be there. There'll be access from the backside, but there won't be any access out through Main Street. And it does allow us a little bit more flexibility and room in that vicinity as part of this. So those are the three kind of Main Street discussions that were lingering from last month. If there's any questions, happy to discuss those in more detail, otherwise.
And Dave, Bob Corning from Stantec, good evening. I just wanted to mention too, I know that there's a lot of interest in the U-turn on the north end of Main Street. We're going to discuss that as part of the Central Square discussion in a few weeks. We're in the process of looking at some different alternatives, running some traffic analyses on that, and we'll be ready to talk about that as part of the Central Square discussion, both the TRC next week, the public meeting, and then ultimately the MSFI, which I believe is the 7th.
Well, you took my comment away, that this evening we are focusing. It's not taking in Central Square, which is going to be a whole lengthy discussion. And we're just cleaning up a few items as you've discussed, as well as the Gilbo and Railroad. So,
Yep.
yes. Onward.
All right, so with that, I'll turn it over to Bob to talk about Gilboa Railroad.
Good evening again. Got a lot to go over today, some really exciting, we think are really exciting opportunities on the Gilboa and Railroad corridor. So this is those two areas as they are currently being recommended, and with some alternatives that we're going to go through for each area. So Gilboa, this is an existing tree analysis, basically looking at the existing tree inventory. So there's 2 trees that are currently proposed to be removed as part of the plan. There's a sugar maple here that's in really poor condition. And then there's a Calorie pear in this location, which is in really tough shape as well, and in a tough location as well. But otherwise, we're ultimately trying to save all of the existing trees in this zone. Some of the inspirations for Gilboa, from a goals standpoint, some of the things that we talked about was improving the pedestrian environment, similar to what we're doing on Main Street, but also looking at opportunities to activate this Gilboa zone. We really think of it as a kind of an underutilized and a great opportunity to improve open space and opportunities for events in the downtown. So some of the things that we're looking at are permanent and flexible seating, overhead lighting, catenary lighting to provide some character, gateways. One of the things that's come up is one of the things that we were really inspired by was the Arts Alive group looked at doing a covered pavilion that is an open-air pavilion kind of on the western end of the transportation building over the existing parking. And that, together with one of the goals that we've been looking at with the city in terms of trying to provide solar for the street lighting, we thought that those two were a great opportunity to look at potentially incorporating a solar field on top of a covered structure. And we'll look at some options for that in a second, but there's some here on this slide, as well as opportunities for events, whether it's tents or food trucks or farmers markets or arts events, looking at opportunities for that as well in this zone. So this is the current recommended option, and we have some options off of this as well. But a couple of the main gestures here are currently there's a lot of pavement out there, and Gilboa Ave is excessively wide. So we've narrowed it to 2 12-foot lanes, one in each direction. By doing that, we've pulled the parking, both the angled parking in front of the diner as well as the perpendicular parking west of the transportation building out to the edge of the street. And that's allowed us to grab some additional sidewalk space for pedestrian zones. This plan also, on the eastern end of Gilboa, Also proposes to eliminate 3 parallel parking spots on the north side of Gilbo in this location, as well as 5 angled spots that are on the south side of Gilbo Ave here. And again, it's an attempt to try to increase the pedestrian zones and the pedestrian areas that are useful for various uses in that zone. The other big thing that I mentioned is the idea of a covered pavilion. So we're showing a structure that's 30 by 220 feet long, and that would be over the existing parking, or over the relocated parking. We've made the parking stalls a little deeper to accommodate not only passenger vehicles, but if we want to use food trucks or other vehicles that might be larger than a pedestrian car. We've increased the depth of that zone. We've also looked at opportunities around the cafe and the corner news and along the rail trail to look at activating those zones with overhead lighting, public art, flexible and permanent seating, covered bike areas, as an attempt to try to activate that zone as well. So this is a section through that perpendicular parking. One of the things that we're looking at with the structure is opportunities for a cantilevered structure, so that we would eliminate the need for posts on the street side of the parking to give more flexibility to that space. But you can see that that zone is 30 feet deep. We have the 2 12-foot travel lanes, and then also by pulling this parking back out to the street side, we're able to gain some additional space between the rail trail and the proposed structure, a more pedestrian zone in that area. Then further east, this is kind of through the transportation building, or YOLO. You can see some of the ideas of narrowing the street to 24 feet, increasing the sidewalk widths on both sides, and then looking at opportunities to activate that zone between the cafe and Margaritas. Just looking at some concepts for programming under that structure. In this scenario, if we had some kind of a art or farmer's market or other kind of event that had tables or tents, you could get upwards of 30 to 35 vendors. You could get some tents along the backside in this open space zone. So we really think it's a great opportunity to provide another location for additional programming in the downtown. And similarly, if there was a food truck, depending on the layout of how the food trucks are actually organized, you could get 8 to 11 food trucks in this area as well. So one of the comments that we've got both from concerns that we've gotten from both the TRC and it also came up during our public meeting was the elimination of those parking spaces on the east end of Gilbo. So there's a couple of alternatives here. So the alternative on the left is what we just presented, where we eliminated those 8 spaces. The middle scenario is basically replicating what's out there now. So we'd put the parallel spaces back on the north side, the angled spaces back on the south side. And then the third option is something in between, where we would replace the parallel spaces on the north side, but then change the angled spaces to parallel, where we would be able to gain a couple of those back on the south side. The one thing to mention is that because of the layout of the parallel spaces, we probably would eliminate these 2 trees, the existing trees that are out there now, to accommodate these parallel spaces on the south side. So that's one of the things we'd like to get some input on at the end of this section. This alternative basically is the same as what we just showed, except it does not have the pavilion structure, and it just has standard 18-foot parking stall dimensions for the perpendicular parking. And what that does is it gives us even more open space between the rail trail and the parking. So that's kind of a no pavilion option. So that's it for Gilbo. Some of the, just to summarize some of the public workshops, I should mention that the public workshop that we had 2 sessions. We had maybe 50 people in the first one and 30 in the second, something like that. So it was pretty well attended. Generally, the feedback was very positive. Certainly at Gilbo, there was positive feedback around the raised intersection, the solar parking structure, the gateway structure, lighting, and bike racks. As I mentioned, there was some comments about keeping the street parking at the east end of Gilbo that we just went over. And there was also a desire, it came up multiple times, for public bathrooms and activating the area between the buildings for positive use, which we've been proposing. So these are some of the, this is on the handout, I believe, that Brett gave you, but these are some of the design discussions that we're hoping to have today. And I don't know whether you want to just go through each one individually, one by one. And then I guess I also wonder, Counselor, how you want to, do you want to have public comment after Gilbo and then after Railroad, or do that at the end?
Why don't we take Gilbo? And if we could have brief public comment, because this has already been discussed with the show and tell section at the rec center. So focusing on Gilbo, if, first of all, committee, do you have any questions or thoughts that you want to put up?
Just the one issue with parking seems to have brought the most concerns from constituents that have called me. And I think it's important not to lose as many spaces as possible. And as I looked at the options, I think we ought to keep as many spaces there as we can. It's not like we're developing something that's extraordinary there. It's just a matter of adding a little bit of grass or just maneuvering a couple of things. I think having those spaces there open, plus there's a couple of businesses right on the corner that a lot of the customers use those spaces. So I would recommend keeping as many spaces in that area as possible.
Okay. Members of the public, if you'd like to make comment, question, or whatnot. Yes.
Chuck Redfern, 9 Colby Street, Keene. I just want to echo Councilor Filio's comments about parking. Around Corner News, there should be parking available there. I think across the street, the parallel parking should be maintained because those are right up front of the downtown activity. And I think Corner News would really be boxed out of parking if all those spaces were removed from it. So that's my comments. I do have comments on Railroad Square itself. Could I address those tonight a little bit? I just have one short comment to make.
Later.
Later?
Yeah.
Another meeting?
We're going to do
Oh, you're going to do that
Railroad
next.
Square when we're done talking about Gilbo. Yes, sir.
Dan Scully. I've worked some with Hearts Alive on the ideas for Gilbo Avenue, and what I want to speak to is the covered parking or event space. All the efforts for Central Square, which I know is not the topic tonight, but I do not believe they can work as an event space, but they can't work at things that need trucks to arrive. You're not going to drive trucks on Central Square. So I think that those efforts are fine, but you need a place that's a permanent setup that can be covered and have power permanently, all those things that need for a permanent setup. I really applaud the scheme they've done with the 30-foot deep parking spaces, because we had proposed and discussed previously covering parking spaces that could be used as parking spaces, metered parking spaces during the day, or closed for events. But the scheme that they're suggesting is much more accommodating, and so I really applaud that. I happen to be working with the Corner News owners, and certainly they are not interested in losing any of those parking spaces. Their nature, their business doesn't need a wider sidewalk for tables or anything like that. So but their business needs people to be able to stop quickly in and out. So they would definitely be supporting keeping the 5 diagonal spaces and the benefit of keeping the trees with that. I think that one of the things we're going to try and do with the Corner News building is really do a gateway to the west, to the gateway to the Gilboa Avenue. And I hope that that's something we can show you at some point soon.
Thank you.
I-
I don't know if Stantec gentleman mentioned, the roof on this covered parking are solar panels.
Yes.
And, just to get that out there.
Yeah, that's
And
correct.
that should power the downtown street lighting. Yes, ma'am. Then, other side.
Vicki
You're
Morton,
up.
275 Water Street. Not a lot was spoken about public bathrooms, but in a real desire to lessen what happened last summer and fall, I would hope that there's an emphasis on getting the public bathrooms somehow included in this, and it does seem to make sense that they might be around the transportation center. So I would speak highly, please, can we have public bathrooms? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Jessica Gelter from Arts Alive. Hi. I just want to tell you about an experience that we had. So last summer, we hosted the Elevate the Arts Festival right there in Commercial Street and along Gilboa Ave, and we had a wonderful turnout. We had over 30 vendors and artists, community arts activities, music, food trucks, and the day was an unpredictable one weather-wise. It was beautiful in the morning, and then midday we had a crazy downpour that came out of nowhere. And artists' wares got wet. It was a slightly dangerous situation for the electricity going to the music tent. I really believe that this covered space would have prevented some of the harm that happened during that event and would be a really wonderful asset for vendors in the region coming to downtown Keene to participate in festivals and to sell their work. I don't know if you know, but our region has over 2,500 independent artists earning a living from their independent artwork and the things that they make, from writing to painting to poetry to sculpture. So this would be a really incredible economic asset for that group of folks here in our region. And not to mention the economic impact for the downtown of festival events, which we even saw this past weekend with the Earth Day Festival that happened up Railroad Square. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other Gilboa comments? Okay, so now committee. We have, we have been furnished these decision points or comment points by our consultants. So I'll tick them off one at a time, and it's not a vote, it's just indicating to the consultants what our thoughts are so they can start making some decisions. Do you want to maintain parking spaces near the Main Street intersection or reduce parking to expand available sidewalk or commerce space? This would be regarding those 8 spaces at Corner News. Yes, ma'am?
I would like to see the ones closest to Corner News be kept. And I know this is going to be a concern for you, but the ones on the other side of the road, maybe less as much. But the ones closest to Corner News, I'd like to see.
So for the purpose of disclosure, I should say I own the building that's on the north side of Gilboa with the 3 spaces that are in question. Where I did ask a question, can that sidewalk be widened? And the answer is yes. So I think, for my 2 cents worth, keep the parking, widen the sidewalk, everyone wins.
Yeah, works for me.
Counselor?
Clarifying question, where would the loading zone be if the parking spots were removed? So for the areas, for those 2 businesses, if one side is the parking lot, I'm just curious where the loading zone would be.
How Corner News would get deliveries?
Corner News and, of course, YOLO, because,
I have a back alley.
So they drop it off in the back alley and then transfer it across the street, is that?
No,
I'm
corner-
sorry, I just,
No, Corner News, and, correct me if I'm wrong, would have a problem with no parking in front of it. There's no parking around the corner and on Main Street, so essentially they're sidewalk locked as opposed to available parking. It's a problem.
Yeah, I guess we don't know where they get deliveries currently, and if it's the angled parking.
Basically off the
then-
street. Off the street,
With the angled parking?
yeah.
Yeah.
so I know that was a concern that was expressed to me about loading zones specifically. And having worked with ice cream before, I know what those deliveries are like.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, even if, whether it's parking or sidewalk, how big the loading zone would need to be, because if cars were parked there, then they would need to stop, the truck would need to stop on the road itself, correct?
They basically stop in front of the transportation center and wheel their deliveries. Or Corner News gets deliveries from small vendors in parking spaces. So, you in as a question?
I think it still sounds like a question mark, right?
Yeah, well, we have a choice of potentially 3+ options, and the hope is that we're going to give them some direction, yes.
So looking at these options, I would be comfortable with the alternative option 1, maintaining existing parking with the parallel, the diagonal parking.
The middle one,
Yep.
good. And he's there, I'm there. And, Counselor, you can speak with the consultants afterwards also, but this is just.
Okay, looking at these, I would say alternative option 2.
Okay, good. Next question, big one. Do you want a covered pavilion for parking, flexible space, solar panel opportunities? That's basically the performance area that's been discussed. Who's up? Yep.
Yeah, I actually kind of like that proposal. Also, we'll use that power to power all the lighting downtown. So it'd be kind of a double win situation. So I like that proposal.
You like it?
Stole all my words.
You like it?
Sorry about that.
I would like it better if it was a 4-story building with affordable housing. But, someone wants to come forward before this is built. I realize that someone's got to come forward. So I would be in favor of the covered parking thing. Item 3, do you want more permanent seating in public spaces? This is more a throwback to the last discussion. Currently, I think we have minimal seating downtown. I think we need seating. What kind of seating becomes an issue in the design of the seating. So your thoughts. It's got to be durable and not something that someone's going to spend all day on necessarily, but still be functional for shoppers and older folks that like to sit down occasionally.
Just comment.
Yes.
Yeah, I have no problem with that. Durable. Location's important. And also, make sure that it can be, even though if it's going to be permanent, we got to take into consideration snow removal in the winter. Because it's one of the reasons we move some of the benches now, so they can plow and clear the sidewalk. So location's important, but I have no problem with that.
Laura?
I'm a yes on that.
You're what?
We're
Yes.
seating it.
Yep. Okay, good. Seating, yes, good. And for the media, can staff give him a copy of the questions?
Yes.
Be a little simpler than taking notes, maybe. Gateway structure across the rail trail to Gilboa Avenue. This, as I understand it, would be something similar to what Ashwillet Park has. I think Keene State has a gateway like that. Yep.
I'd like to see a little more information on it, but as now, I'm in support of it, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Same.
Yep.
I really like this idea.
Okay, thumbs up. We're really good, moving along. providing an option for covered bike parking in the Gilbo Avenue space. Can you speak a little more to what that is?
Sure. Some of the comments that we've heard, both through the TRC and the community, is trying to create opportunities for more covered bike parking along the rail trail, particularly, on both sides of Main Street. So we're suggesting some locations around the cafe, as well as when we get into the Railroad Square discussion, we're proposing some alternatives there as well. So, the exact location, how it's going to be designed, we're still looking at, but the idea would be it'd be somewhere in that vicinity between the cafe and Margaritas along the rail trail.
Yeah,
Yes,
sounds fine to me.
Easy discussion. Okay, and here comes another one. To provide permanent catenary suspended lighting, is a new word for us all, catenary, above the rail trail.
It'd be something, similar to these pictures on the top. Catenary lighting is the string lights.
Oh, string lights.
Yeah.
I'm glad I asked the question. I had no idea.
It's a fancy word for string lights, but yeah. So the idea would be to, animate and activate that space again, with the goal of trying to animate and activate that space between the cafe and Margaritas.
Yeah.
And would our covered solar panels on the covered roof power those lights there?
It could.
They could?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sure they're LEDs or something like that. I put that in as a definite maybe. I'd like to see a little more detail on it, but it does sound interesting anyway.
Okay.
Yes.
I just want to raise a point. I think it's important if we're looking at adding the covered bike parking there and talking about possible restrooms near there. I think it's important that we really consider lighting as a safety measure there, just because I know there has been, that's kind of a hot spot for criminal activity in the past. And if we're adding those structures, I just think it would make smart sense to consider increased lighting in there.
Absolutely. Yes.
I agree. And I think as we've seen over the last few weeks, all the proposals for new events for downtown Keene, where we had kind of shrunk down to just a couple, I mean, it's going up to a couple a month, it seems, through the whole summer. And I think the more lighting, the better, gives it a more festive and secure feel. So I think it's a good idea.
Okay. Anything else you want to share with the consultants? And obviously, you can do it outside this meeting, too.
I just have mixed feelings about it being permanent lighting like that, but I'm not strongly one way or the other, I guess.
Okay. More information. Okay, moving on to the other side of the street, Railroad Square area. So, back to you.
Thank you. Oops. Why did that get in there? Well, I'm going the wrong way. Sorry. Okay, Railroad Square. Again, some of the precedent images that we've generated, the idea of additional public art, whether it's wall murals or something else, fixed and flexible seating with shade, the idea potentially of some kind of a trellis or pergola structure in the space, making sure that we can accommodate events, different kinds of events, whether they're tents or food trucks or other kind of events, looking at opportunities for incorporating interesting furniture, whether it's standing tables, these lit benches, looking at the opportunity potentially in the green area of doing landforms to provide some interest in the green space, looking at opportunities to reinforce the idea that the railroad actually came through there, so the idea potentially of recreating the railroad and the paving, the railroad tracks and the paving, and making sure that there's adequate room for various types of events, Again, looking at some kind of a gateway structure potentially. Those are kind of the things that we looked at as kind of guiding principles for the design. And again, in terms of the recommended design, we do have some tree removals that are proposed just because of the location of the existing trees. The two that are yellow in this location, just north of the building, are in tough shape, and the other four are just in difficult locations, which we'll go through when we go through the design. I'm going to try to blow this up a little bit. No, maybe not. It's hard without a mouse. There we go. So a couple of the big gestures here. This is the current recommended plan. One of the issues out there currently is that the way that the rail trail and the multi-use path cuts through the middle of the plaza space. So one of the things that we're proposing in these alternatives and in the recommended plan is to actually swap the sidewalk that's along the south side of Railroad Street with the shared use path, so that the shared use path would come across Main Street and then go along the north side of the plaza space and then kind of make its way back down to the existing multi-use path. At some point, the pedestrian sidewalk along the parking would come through and then cross into the plaza space. Now, the shared use path could be used by pedestrians as well, but this would give an opportunity to get pedestrians off of that shared use path into the plaza and then either go north and south on Main Street or across Main Street. So that's one big gesture. A couple other things is that we're looking at, currently the Hennessy's restaurant has outdoor seating in a fenced-in area, but it's on grass. So one of the things we're looking at is, should that be a paved area? There's an existing tree there that we would save, but should the plaza be extended to grab that space as well? And is there an opportunity to do outdoor commerce on the north side of the building and just north of where the local burger is as well, on the north side of the space? That building front also has potential opportunities for public art, whether it's a mural wall. The plaza space itself, we're framing with four large trees that are in planters with integrated seating. Kind of creates an outdoor room, an outdoor space that's framed on all four sides. And we'll show how that could be ultimately programmed. We're also showing, similar to on Gilbo, some kind of a gateway arch. So as you're crossing across Main Street or coming down Main Street, this would be kind of a gateway into the Railroad Square Plaza space. As I showed in the precedent images, the opportunity for a pavilion or a pergola. So we're showing that in this location. And it would be potentially connected with, this is what I was talking about, trying to incorporate some of the history by replicating the railroad tracks in some kind of a paving pattern potentially that would help draw you in and connect the space internally. This pavilion could also provide the covered bike parking that we talked about as well. We are proposing to relocate the wall dog signage, the orientation sign that's currently further out on the other side of the sidewalk. And it actually is a part of the reason that there's some visibility issues turning from Main Street onto Railroad Street. It kind of blocks that visibility. So we're proposing to move that back to provide more visibility at the intersection. The rest of the space, we're looking at relocating the existing multi-use path to provide more green space on the south side. And we have some options for the location of that path, which we can go through in a second. We're also, this is an and/or, we're also showing the possibility of a structure over this parking as well. This one would be 20 by 180. It's a little bit more challenging because you don't have the depth that the flexibility of the increased depth that we do at Gilbo. There's also with angled, because Railroad Street's one-way eastbound, we have to have, we need to probably have angled parking, and that makes it a little bit more challenging to lay it out. And, if Gilbo is preferred, it's one of the questions that we'd like to get some feedback from MSFI on is this the preferred location for that structure? Is Gilbo the preferred location, or both? So we can talk about that when we get into the questions. So summarizing, I think that's it for the preferred plan. We do have a number of other slides related to this, and then we have some alternatives. So this is a section, if you were looking east, so Railroad Street is here, the travel lane and the parking and the sidewalk. This would be that kind of outdoor room that we talked about, the idea of potentially catenary lighting again in that zone, and starting to show how tents, if tents were set up for an event, how those could lay out, and then, potential for an outdoor commerce zone along Local Burger or whatever retail establishment is there. Sorry, hold on. Going the wrong way. So this is a programming diagram showing, the opportunity for, again, if you had an art or farmer's market, you could get 30 to 40 tents in there, 40 to 64 vendors, 400 to 600 people. So it really would lay out very well for any kind of event that you would like to have in that location, with or without the structure and over the parking. And then similarly, we looked at food trucks as well. You could probably get 5 to 8 food trucks, 400 to 600 people. You could even potentially, do food trucks on the plaza if you wanted to. And if you were going to have a performance, you have some kind of a temporary stage, we think you could get 400 to 600 people, whether they're standing or sitting in that area. So that could be pretty successful as well. And then a couple of options. We're calling this minimal. So again, this moves the shared use path to the north, but really minimizes, we maintain those 2 existing trees that are in the plaza, add 2 new trees, some bike racks along the trail, and the outdoor seating area, the outdoor commerce zones on the north side of the building. We also looked at, oh boy. Sorry, it's really hard without a mouse, sorry. Testing my dexterity here, lack thereof. We also looked at the opportunity for incorporating a pergola or shade structure. So in this particular plan, we're showing it on the north side of the plaza in this location. So it could be a place for outdoor seating, potentially bike storage again, or other uses. And potentially another pergola along the rail trail. And again, it would still accommodate the tents. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Coming in. There's another one.
Another one.
One for each hand.
But thank you so much. So then the last option, and we can go through these path options, but one of the things that we looked at was relocating the rail trail, the multi-use path to the north as much as possible to try to maximize the amount of green space in this location. I think generally everybody thought that was a good idea. The problem is that it impacts a number of existing trees, as you can see with these X's. So we do have some alternatives for that location. Everybody was, the TRC particularly, was really excited about the increased continuous green space, but we question, at the sacrifice of you losing those existing 4 or 5 trees. We also wanted to talk about the left turn at Railroad. I don't know if we want to do that after we have a discussion about the square, or it's up to you, but that's the presentation on the
I
square so
think
far.
the options are a little confusing. Identifying what's option 1, 2, 3.
So this was the recommended option that we presented first. And the programming items are all based on that recommended option.
Which one has the performance?
Option one. I'm sorry, the recommended option. So all of the programming, all of these diagrams relate
getting
to
worse.
that recommended option.
Go ahead, try.
Yeah, I'll try. So the recommended option, what you saw after that with the stage and some of the food truck festivals was just programming options using that recommended option. So based on the design, what you could do with a temporary stage, how many food trucks you could fit in the shade structure, and how many people you could fit into the space.
So what are we calling this?
This is still the
This
preferred
is
option.
still part of the preferred option.
Okay.
This is just the programming for use of an outdoor stage.
That's right. Sorry, that's confusing.
Are you clear?
I,
Are you?
I do have a question.
No.
I am a little confused about how it would work moving the rail trail, right? That's what we're talking about, moving that, and then would that mean that the other one that's across the street moves as well?
No, so let me see. So, I'm sorry, going the wrong way here. So, the rail trail on Gilboa side is here, and we're proposing the tabled intersection at Main Street and Railroad here, where you have the rail trail crossing as well as pedestrian crossing. And then that would continue along the north side of the shared use path and then make its way back down to the existing.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
I think so. Thank you.
Yep.
Kat, anything?
No, just the different programming models just shows the versatility of that space, really.
Ready? It's good? Okay, onward.
Is there going to be a public comment?
Yes.
Oh. Jesus. I think unless you want to talk about the left turn lane on Main Street under Railroad, I think that was it for the Railroad Square presentation.
Okay, let's talk about it.
Do you know how to get this full screen? I forget. Hopefully she's coming in.
The pro is coming.
Okay. Thank you so much. So that was it for the Railroad Square presentation. We do have some additional information on the left turn off of Main Street onto Railroad, but if you want to go through the Railroad Square Plaza design first.
Why don't you do the left turn?
Okay. One of the things that, so again, this is oriented the other way. Main Street is running left to right, north is to the right. The current plan has no left turn from Main Street southbound onto Railroad Street. What we're showing is that the Green Island would be extended, but it would just be a paved, kind of a small raised apron, so that it would discourage left turns for vehicles, but it could be used for emergency vehicles, so that emergency vehicles, if they're coming down Main Street, they could mount this and get onto Railroad Street. There was some concerns raised in the public meeting about how important that left turn lane is. That left turn is from Main Street onto Railroad. We do have some of the traffic counts. Dave, I don't know if you know them off the top of your head or whether we need to look at them.
Yeah, so I think the counts vary. I think they're heaviest actually in the morning. There's about 50 left turns, and you can see they're not allowed, but you could also add in the 4 kind of single cut-throughs. So roughly 50 cars in that peak hour in the morning, and then it goes down as the day goes on, 42 in the midday peak, and then I think it's in the 30s, like 34 in that afternoon peak. So it's not a heavy move, but there are some vehicles that make that left. There are other ways to get onto Railroad off of Roxbury from the north side, and then obviously coming up from the south, the right turn in would still be available.
And I think the way, correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, but I think the way that Evan modeled that with no left turn onto Railroad is that they would take a left further down.
Yeah, we
There's a
did
couple
look at if you diverted all the lefts out of there and whether they went down to Eagle and kind of looped around and came back or went down around the roundabout, it's not going to have a noticeable effect on any of the other intersections. You know, I think people will kind of divert themselves. Either they're going to go down Roxbury and kind of come in the backside. They could use the roundabout and circle and come back there. So there are other ways to get on a railroad from that southbound side, you know, coming from the north.
Eliminating the left also eliminates the U-turn, which I'm sure you want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
which-
Yeah, with that raised island, I think the fewer kind of conflicting movements we can have on that tabled intersection is a better, from a safety perspective for the use of that intersection.
Not happy, but I understand why. There's just too much going on there. Okay, questions, anybody?
Just in terms of the public workshop summary, it's a long list, and I'll try to go through them quickly, but we got really positive feedback on the event space to promote a lot of different activities. Good feedback on the outdoor dining zones, the outdoor commerce areas for surrounding restaurants to help activate the space. There's a lot of positive feedback around covered bike parking, pergola, catenary lighting, gateway structure, and the solar parking structure. Support for integrating more art via mural, historic remnants, sculptures. Concerns about cycle pedestrian conflicts on the shared use path, which was mentioned. Concerns about bike lane transition from Gilbo through raised intersection to Railroad. Concerns about visibility at Main Street Railroad turning. That's what we talked about with that, the wall dog sign being relocated. Desire for bollards at raised intersections, which we would incorporate. Desire for clear signs of allowed bike zone, which we've talked about in terms of the management of the bike areas. And desire to maintain existing trees in the green space and adding topography where feasible. So that's some of the feedback that we got from the public workshop.
Okay. So, some brief public comments or questions. Yeah, Chuck.
Thank you, Chair.
Do you know
It's all
Brandon?
good to me, you know. The only part I have a question on is on Railroad Square in the northeast corner. There's a lot of activity going on there where the pedestrians and the shared use path, and yeah, that's a good, right in this area here.
Here.
Seems a little stressed. You know, I think maybe 2 feet wider of a semicircle, quarter circle, that gives you space for people coming off from the other side of the street, crossing the street, people coming down the sidewalk, people going up the sidewalk, people transitioning off the shared use path. I just think there needs to be a little more room there to avoid conflict. And I did talk to one of the consultants that said, that sounds like a good idea. So I just wanted to pass that on. I'm not trying to get anybody in trouble. She didn't say we'll do it, but she said it sounds like a good idea. And so
She
with
says that
that,
to everyone.
so that's my only comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Dan. And then behind you. Yep.
I seem to be full of compliments tonight. The tabled intersection, I think, is very good. Suspect that's already basically been a decision. As designer of the oval down the bike path, I learned two things, at least two things. One is people like to be seen. So expanding Railroad Square is the right thing to do if you want to make a place for everybody, because they don't go to the ovals. And the other thing I learned with the oval is that don't underestimate the difficulty of moving a federal granted bike path. Just to do the little bit in the oval, it took some work. The other comment on the idea of a covered event space along Railroad Street there. Make sure when you do the covered event space, you do it near a place that has a lot of parking space, a lot of other parking spaces, because people have to go to those events. So I think the Gilboa Avenue is probably a better first priority for that. Not that the one on Railroad Street is bad, but it's just, I think it would be second priority.
Thank you. Nancy.
Okay, Nancy Ancharsky, 60 School Street, Keene, New Hampshire. Thank you for continuing this workshop format. I think it's very helpful. It allows people to interact and give their comments. Previously, I've stated my views very clearly, especially concerning the downtown trees. Today, I have a few questions and a comment. First of all, how many trees located in that Gilboa Avenue, Railroad Street area are going to be cut down to accommodate the raised crosswalk, the bump outs, all of the other things that are going on there?
Excuse me, I think there was 2 on Gilboa and 5 Railroad.
All right, so in the clump right around the intersections on both sides of the street, in the Bartlett tree study, I counted about 13 trees in the area. 13 trees that were listed as mature or semi-mature. 10 of those trees were in good condition, and 3 were listed as fair. Those were in the Bartlett tree inventory on pages 18 through 21. So I don't see as many trees on the drawings, but that might just be the drawings. Again, this isn't totally related to tonight's topic, but it is somewhat related. At the last meeting, I asked about breaking down the costs of this whole project into its component parts. Somewhere on the website, I found a budget, conceptual estimate of the budget. And it listed things such as excavation and embankment, paving, curbing, signs, huge, just big things that don't make much sense to the public. All of that, including some landscaping, added up to $6,590,099. Then there was drainage and water quality, some things like that. I also noticed in this budget, estimated concept budget, that the water and sewer part of the project was going to cost $3,400,000, but it was excluded from the $16 million subtotal for some reason. And then there were some items that I didn't understand, but they were explained tonight. The solar canopy, that is a great idea. I like the idea, but it is going to cost $1,150,000. So the other one will probably cost the same amount. I was surprised at the bottom of this budget to see the project totals, that the estimate is actually $20,902,900, which includes the previously excluded sewer and water costs. I thought that replacing sewer and water lines was the original point of this project. There were some grant monies in there, and I was wondering if we've received any of these grants, or is this just proposed also? So that's another question. There was $13 million of grant money, which would be great if we get all of that. So again, it would be very helpful to the public if the estimated costs were broken down into components that made sense. And then one final comment on like going through the website, that all of Santec's original drawings from way, way back are still included on that website. So going through it is very, very confusing. So I think it would be extremely helpful to list the current plans, the details of those plans, and the costs.
Thank you.
So if anybody wants this information, I have it.
Thank you. Anyone else like to make comments or, yeah? Good evening.
Good evening. Jay Kahn, Darling Road, in Keene. The couple of things that I'd like to address. First off, I'll defend the turn lane for a bit. As a person who comes down Court Street to downtown, the ability to access either street parking along the way or the decision to turn left and access the only parking structure that there is in downtown currently is that route. Being able to turn onto Railroad Street from Main Street. And I do that. I do that a lot. The likelihood of traveling down to the Rotary at Winchester Street would probably send me out of downtown, meaning bye-bye. I'm going someplace else. And it's not a good alternative. That's my opinion. So I do think that the left turn there is a very useful one, and I'd encourage it. It's also, that is a good turnaround, meaning if I'm at the Colonial Theater parking and I want to go back down Court Street, my turnaround is going down Railroad and accessing back on, is it, I'm not sure, is it Commercial Street or what I'm not sure what the street is.
93rd?
No. I'm turning around at the parking garage and coming back out. Church Street. Church, of course. Yeah, of course, church. All right. So that's my preference. The left turn is important for circulation for me, and I think for other people who access downtown via Court Street. Issue one. Issue two. I'm concerned, we don't need to really show the benches up near the buildings on Railroad Square. I mean, it's an interesting feature, but what those venues that are at that intersection, whether it's a burger location or the bar, they will make proposals for outdoor space, as they should. And so, I mean, that can always be added either by the owners or by the city with negotiations. In any case, it's just not, to me, it's clutter, and it presupposes that those locations aren't going to ask for outdoor space on Railroad Square side. And I think that they would. We've seen outdoor fenced-off areas for Hennessy's out there. The performance space that is there, issue 3, is it's very close to Main Street. And what we've seen when there are performances that are close to Main Street is that it will attract people right there, as opposed to drawing them further into the space, as might be were it closer to where the green space is. And actually, what I'd suggest is that you also put electrical utilities along a path, so long as you got conduit going down, at multiple points. Were there to be a solo performer, it's going to attract a smaller audience. Were there to be a larger stage with multiple acts going on in a day, then you draw it even further down towards the green space. That kind of flexibility, but to put it that close to Main Street just is inviting a lot of congestion on Main Street that isn't useful for pedestrian flow. And then preserving whatever kind of trees that there are on the trail, moving the trail just, doesn't, I think that's one of the good things about that parkway as it's been developed. The other things that I think in addition to asking those owners what would they like to maybe use that space for, is to check in with the marathon folks and the 4 on the 4th folks, well, it's 4 on the 4th, as to where their starting lines are, finish lines, just to make sure that there aren't obstructions that interfere with those kinds of outdoor events. That's my feedback on concerns. Otherwise, I'm looking forward to being there. Good.
Thank you. Yes, in the back.
Autumn Delacroix of Court Street. There was one mention of possible widening out of a curve on the inside of this turn on Railroad. And I think there's a thing that's easy to forget is because it's raised, everything's the same height. There's this sense of that curve that's drawn there meaning something. It doesn't. It's just level of the whole intersection. That's why I think it's really important to mention. There was some mention of bollards too. A bollard on that corner will help prevent somebody entering onto this raised intersection in their vehicle and turning into pedestrian spaces. I think that's really important to keep in mind. And I think that same idea, where there's a confusing element with the raised intersection, is exactly why the left turn is so dangerous, because it's open to pedestrian space. And it's just, there's no way for that to be safe. I love so much of this. It's really beautiful overall. And yeah, I'm gonna echo, we probably don't wanna move the bike path in the green space for more green space. It just seems like it's trading some of the north side of the green space for south. I don't really see it. And it takes out trees, which, no. There's already a lot going on. Let's keep it simple on that. But, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Yep. Somebody. Who? Oh,
Vicki Morton, 275 Water Street. Many decades ago, I served on the planning board, and the whole design around the buildings on Railroad Street, where we have the curved wall, was to create a display area, an entertainment area, whatever, and it's slightly beyond the maps that we're seeing here. But I would hope that we would somehow incorporate that space back into activity space for downtown, especially with the Railroad Square, number one. Number two, I don't see where this is going to come up on the agenda down the road, so I want to bring it up here. Starting at the Railroad Street, Gilboa Ave crosswalk, and going south, the median between the two traffic lanes, north and south traffic lanes, is not used for snow storage, and there's no parking on either side. However, the issue with that green space from Gilboa Railroad all the way down to the circle, the Marlborough Street, Winchester Street Circle, is the traffic light glare coming from the opposite direction. And I see that there are trees included on that median all the way down through, but I would like to also see some lower plantings that help block the traffic glare, oncoming traffic glare. Thank you.
good thought. Good. Yes, John.
Jessica Gelter, It's Alive. I just want to celebrate the wonderful design of Railroad Square. We use it a lot with Art Walk and presenting music, and we support organizations like Keene Music Festival using it. It's a beautiful space. One of the things that we have noticed in doing our events is that, especially during the summer, shade trees are incredibly important. Breaking down from our festival last year, granted it was in a different location, but breaking down in the parking lot, folks were getting overheated, were getting heat stroke, and it would have benefited from more shade in the area. So I'm also going to speak in support of keeping as many trees as possible. And another thing that came up for me as we were going through the slides is the number of people that could potentially attend the event, 400 to 600 people. Again, goes to that importance of having public bathrooms available, especially during hours when not all the stores or restaurants would be open or necessarily welcome to those visitors. And then the third point is I'm so excited about the spaces to be able to be used for vendors events. One of the big needs for those events is public Wi-Fi and being able to access internet. We have worked out really wonderful relationships with adjoining buildings on occasion where they allow our artist vendors to use their Wi-Fi, but having 30 to 40 vendors using a business's Wi-Fi is a little excessive. So I'm just going to advocate for that as well. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. Counselor.
Hi, Bobby Williams, City Councilor, Ward 2. I guess I just wanted to express a concern I saw with that shade structure over the parking spaces. If we're expecting to get solar energy out of there, it's right next to a bunch of trees, and there's buildings around, so we might not get that much solar energy out of it. So,
Good observation. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Paula Souza from Middle Street. So I moved to Keene in 2001 and raised 2 children here and have walked up and down Main Street many, many times for many years. And as a mother, there's certain areas you keep your eye on with your young children. And one of the areas is exactly the spot we're talking about. As I understand, for some people it is a convenience to take that left-hand turn. I've never taken that left-hand turn. I always go down Roxbury to access the parking spot. I've even forgotten it's there, except for the memories of cars focusing on trying to cross that and not paying attention that there's people trying to cross the crosswalk. That and of course, around the circle was always a heightened concern with young children trying to get to that middle area where they all wanted to be. So I would be in favor of not having that left-hand turn. I've had a friend that's just moved out of Keene and is looking for housing in all different places of Maine, another friend in parts of Massachusetts. And the one thing they both said is there's no place like Keene, anywhere. It keeps getting better. It keeps getting better. I'm in awe of these drawings, and we're going in the right direction. I welcome this public feedback and support. We're doing a lot of wonderful right things here in this city that acts like a town. I love that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah.
Brent Nolan, 36 Red Oak Drive. I just want to second the motion for where Railroad comes off of Main Street, if that can, the shared use trail, if that can be widened or somehow, it seems like it's a pinch point as a cyclist and a pedestrian and a driver. It just seems like the flow of traffic, if somebody is on their bike, really you should dismount and move, but you're gonna have pedestrians, cyclists, visitors from elsewhere, so maybe it's just whatever can be accommodated in terms of widening that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so looks like all present have had a chance to speak a bit. So now to the committee, we have 8 topics to discuss regarding Railroad Square. The first is the preference for the layout of the shared use path through Railroad Square. And we saw a number of different options of it. Okay, Randy, Laura, somebody?
Well, the preferred to the city manager, I mean, the preferred is what was originally talked about. And even when we say preferred, it can still be tweaked. It's not like we're just locked in, right? Most of that stuff's just movable. So I think the basic preferred, I think it was the first one they showed up there. And then, like the couple of people mentioned, there might be a pinch point. I mean, that can easily be taken care of, I think, without, any major drawing changes or anything. So I think the preferred one, and then just kind of tweak as we go.
Yeah, okay.
My favorite option, particularly for the layout of the shared path, would be slide 30, option 3, I believe. I like it further up on the north side. As someone who's been part of a team that hosts events on Railroad Square, I really like the idea of having uninterrupted flow there. And yet still being able to attract people from the bike path crossing through may stop and take a break and participate in the event, as we've seen with our Juneteenth events that have been held there. So I know it's probably not feasible, most ideal to move the bike path, but I do like that option when we're talking just the shared bike path route.
So for clarity, for me anyway, alternative option 3 basically is preferred moving the bike path. Is that about
This
right?
was an alternative that was looked at, but it's not what's in the recommended option. And the reason that it's not in the recommended option is because of the loss of those 5 trees that would need to be necessitated to do that. The preferred option, the recommended option,
Yeah.
is here.
Well, I'm looking at it, I want to save the trees, but I also don't want to have the bike path dividing the green space quite like that. So, choices. I think I'll save I'll go with the trees. Laura?
I guess I would go with the recommended option. I just want to say, I've heard a lot of people express concerns about safety, and I just want to make sure that throughout this process, as we're making decisions, I don't think that we are necessarily going to be the ones to identify what might impact the risk to another area. So if we making one change, so I hope that you'll let us know as we're going through
Yeah.
that could cause, these two decisions combined may cause a significant safety impact.
Yep. And I totally agree with you, and if I've learned anything through this process, you make a change over here, and it affects something over here, and it just ripples through the project, and that's the task of our consultants to keep us in it. Okay, so you have input on that. The next, question 2, do you want to expand available commerce areas or public event space in Railroad Square? I think that's a pretty simple
Yeah,
yes.
yes.
Yes. Number 3, we didn't really talk about this, the mounded landscape area. It's an interesting design feature.
Where's that?
Do you have a slide that shows that? I think it's an excellent way to save money.
Sorry, in this option, that's what these lines are representing, kind of a mounded area. The idea was that in any of the schemes, trying to incorporate a little bit of topography, the area is so flat, it provides some interest. So it was just a design idea that was generated for discussion.
I think if we want to have increased commerce area, it's better to leave it flatter. I think you mound that, and as we just saw this weekend, we had a small event that turned out to be a big event. And people putting out those little portable tents aren't going to want to be on the side of a mound. So I think if we want to increase commerce and have potentially concerts down there or whatever, it should remain flat.
I don't want to hate insult the landscape designer that, was it you? But, no, no mound as far, yes? No, mound?
I could do without the mound.
Okay, no mound. Covered pavilion for parking, the flexible space solar panel. Those are the panels shown in option 3, I guess. I have concerns, eventually, we're going to be talking about money.
Yeah.
And, sooner or later, and I think that'll be the first thing that goes, unfortunately.
I agree.
So.
I agree.
And Council Williams' observation about how effective they would be is also pretty strong. So.
If I may, just the idea of, having a structure here versus Gilbo or both, I think would be useful to get some input on. I think, from what I've been hearing, I think there's a pretty good support for the one at Gilbo and not so much for this one.
Correct.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can I add to that? I would still like to see, even if we don't do a covered pavilion there at the parking spots, if we could accommodate and have some power supply so that we could possibly still utilize that space for food trucks and whatnot.
Easy, yeah. Yes, okay.
That's all good.
Number 6, option for covered bike parking in Railroad Square. I would like to see what this covered, what it looks like. 6. And if it's not taking up a lot of space and not obnoxious, then sure, why not?
Yeah.
I would,
Yep.
sorry, I would say that if we do have.
Microphone.
Yeah, just leave it on.
Sorry. I would say that if we do have covered bike parking across the street, it wouldn't be a priority for me to build a separate structure here, especially where right now this is more of an open area. There aren't structures, so adding a structure might just kind of congest the area. If people who bike have a different perspective, I'd be open to hearing that at some point, but I would say one side of the street in one intersection would be fine.
I'd rather see a bathroom.
that would be good too.
Michael Conway, 51 Railroad Street. The other consideration I don't see any evidence has been taken into account is that building a structure, and that's what it is. I mean, it's maybe just a roof, but it's a structure. In that location is going to throw shade on a residential building across the road and reduce their passive solar.
Okay. So I don't hear an awful lot of support about covered bike parking on Railroad Square.
I have no problem with it. If it doesn't take up a lot of extra room and it doesn't add a lot of extra cost, I'd be fine with that. I'm certainly not objecting to it, but I think as the chair mentioned a little bit, as we get down to the nitty gritty, we're gonna start looking at cost, and something's gonna start getting eliminated because it happens in every project. So I would look at that as more of a cost issue.
I agree with Counselor Filio. And whether we do covered or not covered, I think we also want to encourage businesses to also provide some of that bike racks and whatnot as well. But I'd like to see at least a bike rack there.
Right.
Yeah, bike racks are good. Next question, 7, regarding permanent seating in Railroad Square. I think the mayor makes a good point. Maybe a little premature for that.
Just kind of the same answer. What is permanent, and can we move it during, snow season? How much permanent seating do you need when it's 20 below out and a couple of feet of snow? So I think it just has to do with more of what is permanent, and does permanent mean it's permanent until December or January, and then Public Works pulls them up and puts them back in the spring?
The seating may turn out to be rocks. Big rocks.
I wanted to clarify, some of the seating options that we're showing on the north sides of the buildings were more showing what's possible when that business licenses the space versus what we are proposing to install as part of this project. So really what would be proposed and built by the city would be a paved surface, either concrete or pavers or some other durable surface that could be used for seating or some sort of cafe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
So much like we have now with the wall, so to speak, right?
Yeah, and I would just add to that what we've been talking about in terms of adding some permanent seating option are things like those large stones in different areas. And I think that Councilor Filio's point is a good one, that we want to have them placed, if we did put them somewhere, that they wouldn't become an issue in the winter in terms of clearing or make it difficult for us to hold an event. And so it would have to be strategically placed.
Okay, so that's a more time discussion for you guys. And our final question regarding public vehicular access from southbound Main Street to Railroad Street. Absolutely, access for emergency vehicles will be maintained, but the question really comes down to the left turn. My thoughts are, need some more data. I really, I'd like to keep it. I really think it's needed, but I also think there's just so much going on in that space that may get sacrificed. So, you?
I think you know my opinion. I say get rid of that left turn and a lot of the other left turns on Main Street, but we've had this conversation many times.
Well, this may drift into the conversation next regarding the square and slip lanes.
Oh, I think that one.
Because there has to be a way to reverse directions.
Mhm.
Yep, you.
Oh, good.
Laura?
Yeah.
I would be comfortable getting rid of it, and part of it is just that when everything is happening in that close space, and we're also talking about having activity going on there, possibly lighting on one side, that's a lot to keep track of, having parking where people would also be making turns. I think it just adds a lot right there, and I do think that it could really impact safety. So that would be my thought.
Okay, well, yep.
If you're done with that item, item number 5 in regards to a gateway type structure.
Oh, and this one.
Is similar to what we were talking about with Gilbo Ave, following a similar design to what we have at Asheville River Park.
Yep,
once again, a cost issue.
Yep.
Maybe get some donations but that'll be a cost issue.
Right, good.
Part of me would say no, just because if the bike path, if it's no longer, because if there's not a clear path across the street, then that just wouldn't make sense to me to have that.
Well, let's hear from the designers what they can do with it or not.
I kind of see the 2 trees that we would be planting there as the essential gateway structure, a natural gateway structure.
I think everything can be accommodated there, but let's see what you guys can do, what you can draw.
Okay.
One comment on lighting. A couple of comments on lighting, and I heard these at the rec center, and I heard a comment tonight. And that has to do with lighting downtown, especially if it rains and you get glare, especially traffic coming north. You come into downtown, you can't see the crosswalks because of the glare. Isn't it true the lighting we have downtown is not down lighting? That type of lighting is more decorative lighting. Like on the Common, it's good because you have lighting going out. But isn't it true lighting in congested areas should be down lighting and not side lighting, because the side lighting with these lights goes into people's windshields as they're coming up the street? I assume the new lighting, and I probably getting a little ahead of myself, the new lighting, whatever we use, will be strictly down lighting onto the street. Am I assumed correctly?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so well, this concludes our discussion items. Anything further from committee?
Anybody got 20 million?
Yeah, and this has been, I think, very concise, valuable, and brief. Anyone else, anything to add this evening? And otherwise, definitely tune in to
Next Wednesday, right?
Central Square. Yes, sir.
I'm Tim Jordan, 275 Water Street, and I appreciate all the public discussion. You've been very thorough on the options that you've presented, and I just want to remind people that, and I understand why we're doing this piecemeal, because we have to talk about a lot of different things. One of the potential problems of doing it piecemeal is we do this piece tonight, we do the next piece a couple of weeks from now, we do the third piece a little bit further on, and when we get to the fourth piece, we may find that what we liked in the first piece, we're unable to do because something's more important in the fourth piece. And so without having a process, maybe at the end about, this is what I'm suggesting, talking about the whole thing, we could make decisions now, even though we're not making decisions, we're leaning somewhere and we're doing a lot of good work and people are getting, oh, that's interesting. Perhaps we're going to do that, and then a month from now, we find we're unable to. And I'm not talking about money, I'm just talking about the process itself and the decisions that we're making or recommending today may either limit us or allow us, not allow us, but we're going to have to come back and rehash this again. So that's just an observation. It's good work, I understand why we're doing it this way. I just want to remind everybody that the decisions that we may make now may limit us further on, or we may have to come back and revisit. So that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so before we go, just final summary timeline. Where are we in terms of we've applied for a grant, when's our next meetings, and when might people expect to see shovels in the ground?
Thank you, everyone, for
Not that
the
old.
great discussion tonight. We have a final closing slide that we wanted to share that Bob just pulled up. So the next planned public engagement for this project is May 1st at the Keene Recreation Center. And the focus of that meeting is going to be talking about Central Square and some of the turning movements that we've been throwing back and forth over the past couple of months. And then May 8th, we'd be coming back to MSFI for a very similar discussion like we're having tonight, but focused on Central Square. I think Mr. Timothy, he has a good point that there is probably a need for a consolidated review of what we've reviewed to date. And to Ms. Ancharsky's point earlier, she mentioned some of the trees that are proposed to be removed at Gilbo and Railroad, but they're also at the Main Street intersection. So yes, it's convenient to break it up this way, but it's true, we can't completely isolate these areas. So I think that is going to be part of the process as we wrap up the public discourse. And so we've tentatively scheduled a council workshop in June for this project that we hope to be kind of acting as that wrap-up meeting and discussion, which we hope would then be referred back to MSFI in July or August for full approval. And the federal grant, the RAISE grant that we've applied for, it does throw a little bit of uncertainty in the overall schedule because the timeline that it takes for award, right now we're expecting we would know about that by the end of June of this year. However, the time frame for notifying and executing that agreement has historically been very long for some of our other federally funded projects. And it's unlikely that if we get the federal grant, that we'd be ready for construction in fiscal year or calendar year 2025. Part of that is, again, the time it takes to execute that agreement. And then also, when you have federal funding, you have to go through a much more thorough environmental documentation and permitting process that covers environmental resources, historic resources, cultural resources, and all those are very important factors, but it just takes a really long time to work through that. So as far as shovels in the ground, that's still unclear at this time. I think if we were not successful in the federal grant, we would be able to wrap up this public process in July and August and then start the really detailed design work on the construction documents, and we could be ready for construction in calendar year 25. So there's still some uncertainty involved, and I think once we get to the end of June, we're going to have a lot better idea.
Yep. That is an anxious time, very anxious time. Okay, so anything further, committee?
See you next week.
What's the, city attorney's not here. Is this more time? Last time we just kind of walked out. Continue?
I think we're just continuing the conversation, yeah.
Okay.
It's just since we didn't take any votes.
No motions, no votes?
Informational?
Yeah.
No, not even.
I don't
Move
think
to
there's.
continue the discussion.
There you go.
Second, good.
Second.
All in favor? Good. All right. Have to satisfy the city clerk.
And the minute taker.
And thank you all very much for coming and participating.
Good talk.